Welcome to Cabaret at the Kit Kat Club, a sinister and visionary new revival of the classic Broadway musical, now open on Broadway. There's no other way to describe this experience other than totally immersive. You're actually in the Kit Kat Club. Here's Beth Stevens with another edition of Building Broadway.
Thanks, Samson. Scenic and costume designer Tom Scutt was nominated for 2 Tony Awards for transforming Broadway's August Wilson Theater into the Kit Kat Club. Let's go inside the immersive world of Cabaret. Thank you for inviting us into the Kit Kat Club.
Thanks for being here, Beth.
I have to ask you to go back to the beginning. When you and director Rebecca Frecknell were first thinking about Cabaret, what was the vision you discussed?
We knew really early on we wanted it to feel like a kind of home for artists, not least because of the context in which it was created. You know, I think that through the pandemic, a huge amount of artists in the UK especially were sort of left out in the cold. And so this felt like an opportunity to take over a building and to sort of plant some seeds, I suppose, plant some creative seeds with new artists and think in 360, not just about the performance, not just about the performers, but who was going to be involved in the project in terms of commissions from artists and other collaborators around the building. So it was a really kind of rich foundation, you know, that sort of launched us on our way.
Obviously, we know Cabaret takes place in Weimar, Berlin in 1930s, but we're on 52nd Street, but I don't know where we are. We could be anywhere.
Great. I wanted it to feel like artists, creatives, queer culture had sort of taken over a building that was part of the mainstream, I suppose, and subverted it slightly. So that does, of course, have connotations of 1920s Berlin. It also has many different connotations over the 20th, 21st century. And there are touch points that I sort of lent into slightly from all sorts of different eras, and just to create something that feels dreamlike, I suppose. I wanted it to sort of feel transportive and that we're being taken somewhere else and someplace else at a different time, but not necessarily completely sort of nail down or be specific about when that is.
We have to talk about the costumes too, because you did both the scenic design and the costume design.
Yes.
Tell me how you let those complement each other.
Or not, in a way. It's sort of, there's something deliberately jarring sometimes, and I guess I sometimes work with a color palette that is, in the case of Cabaret, very much derived from the space. So I suppose the costumes were very much sort of extrapolations from the space. But I also wanted it to feel, you know, very punchy, I suppose, and unapologetic. And I think that is what Cabaret is. I think Cabaret as a piece demands that you treat it with a level of boldness and bravery. And that means sometimes ruffling a few feathers and creating something that maybe feels not your normal Cabaret, I suppose.
We have to talk about the birthday hat. Cabaret is often revived. It's a very beloved musical. And so we do have expectations of what Cabaret might look like, and this is not that.
I just wanted it to feel like an exuberant party, youthful party that slowly gets shut down. And so the individuality of the characters is vital, the Technicolor element is really important, but also a childishness. And I think that this is, in a way, a story of innocence and experience. Yeah, I wanted it to feel like almost like a kid's birthday party at the beginning of the show, in a way, like a kind of slightly crazy, unhinged kind of kid's birthday party, and the hat came from that.
Well, I think we need to move around this space, because what we haven't said is how immersive this production is. And when you said the Kit Kat performers, you really mean that we are among the pre-show when we first come into the space.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the interesting thing about this production is that it is actually the best of both worlds. You have an immersive element to it. You arrive, you're welcomed to the space, almost like you go down a kind of rabbit hole transformation, and you really do forget what's happening outside and where you are. But yeah, we should look at the rest of it.
All right, here we are going into the vault bar.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful space, but it looks like this is one of the areas where you got to use the artists that you were talking about.
Yeah, for sure. And also some of the original details from here. I mean, obviously this theatre has had many, many renovations over the last 100 years. So a huge part of this job was not only what are we going to bring in, but also what are we going to bring out and what are we going to celebrate and use rather than try to cover up. And I think that sort of speaks somewhat to the whole endeavor anyway. You know, how much are we pulling from history and how much are we sort of adding onto it. We celebrated all the pattern work and all the painting in the ceiling, and we've got these sort of reflective tiles that we put in. And then on the bar, which is this amazing Art Deco bar that they have here, I got to a point in the process and I felt like something was missing, and I came across the work of Jeremy Anderson, who is a ceramicist and a light artist who creates these incredible table lamps, ceiling lamps. I think very quickly he realized that the aesthetic that we were looking for matches so much with the work that he does.
So when you have a drink in here, take note. Can you tell me a little bit about the iconography that you've used throughout the theater?
The eye for the show is a logo, is a theme that we've sort of taken and run with in a way. It sort of it sowed a little seed in London, and me and Rebecca have just exploded it over here. I think it sort of says something of the dreamlike world, but it speaks so much of voyeurism and complicity and somehow always being observed. Like who is being observed? Is it the performers or is it the audience, you know? This is the Guild Theatre plaque with the first seasons in the theatre. And then it says, dedicated to the purpose that within these walls may be celebrated with gaiety, with pity and with truth, the divine pageant of the human soul. That was and is Cabaret in a way.
Yeah.
You know, the comedy, the tragedy and the politics in the middle of it. We sort of just played with imagery around the space. There's a teardrop for the pity, there's the party hat, the MC's party hat for the gaiety, and a key for the truth.
And you repeated those words up here.
Right, yeah, they're sort of dotted around in various parts of the venue.
I feel like this design is everywhere, and I didn't even notice it before, so tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first staircase as you come down into the space, and I wanted to try and emphasize the kind of cave-like walls of this theatre and really kind of make it a virtue, and that it feels like a sort of warren or something as you go downstairs. And so, yeah, I just sort of felt like it was the place to do some sort of cave painting type sort of situation.
And you did it yourself, didn't you?
I did.
With help,
yeah,
with help.
I did do it myself. Yeah, it was good. It was a very good meditative.
You got all the way up.
Yeah. Spent a lot of time as the set was going in with some headphones on back here and painting, and it just actually was the safest place for me to be. And it sort of does do what I want the whole project to be, which is just blurring the edges of things. I wanted to sort of just deconstruct and just kind of make things a bit blurrier so that it doesn't feel so much like a kind of a grand Broadway house. You know, we want it to really feel like a club, and that requires a certain amount of blurring the lines.
Okay, so now we're in the red bar. It's very quiet in here right now, but when I came to see Cabaret, it was bodies and drinking, and in all of that, you have these beautiful paintings. So tell me about them.
Okay, so these are amazing commissions by this extraordinary artist, Jonathan Lyndon Chase. And I really love about this project trying to find artists who are sort of adjacent to theatre or slightly related to it in some way in their work is sort of represented, but not quite in the same world, and just fusing. I think so much of this project is about doing that. It's like interfacing theatre with fashion, with architecture, with hospitality, and with fine artists. They've done this brilliant thing, which I wasn't expecting, but there's collage in here, and so there's lots of the costume elements from the production that are actually in the imagery on the walls. So yeah, this is Helga's shorts and some of Rosie's trousers, and sort of amazing just watching the company spot them all, and yeah, it's amazing.
We've made it. We're in the green bar. You know a designer is committed when you dress the tables and the ceiling and the bar and so much.
It's slightly obsessive, isn't it? I just wanted this to feel like a kind of old New York gay bar in some way, or like a kind of old institution, you know. I think it leans more into the New Yorkness than it does into the Berlinness in a way.
When you say old gay bar, you mean like 70s, 80s?
Yeah, like a sort of mid, you know, I kind of think about places like Julius and stuff, and I just kind of think that there is I have such fond memories of these like amazing important places in this town, and this is slightly a nod to that. One of the things we've got in here is this board that we've made behind the bar, which grows with memorabilia as the show goes on. So if we have an event, any special guests will take their photos and they end up on the board. So Joel Gray's up there with John Kander having a drink at this table. And then we've got illustrations from Eddie and Gail and Steven Skybell of their own Cabaret eyes, which they've signed. And so we sort of like to build it up. So
It's
it
gonna
just
keep
has
growing.
this kind of historical feel, yeah.
And you've got kitsch going on.
It's so kitsch, and I think in a way that's sort of, it's definitely cathartic. I feel like I'm releasing something, and I think that it just invites this sort of air of playfulness and freedom. I think it's about freedom. I think sometimes our experiences in the West End and Broadway can seize up slightly in the public spaces, and I just wanted it to feel much freer.
And don't miss the pineapples.
It's true.
Okay, we made it here into the theater. And it's such a beautiful space, but a lot of this seating wasn't here prior to this production.
Yeah, I mean, it's all pretty much new. The old mezzanine still exists. That's over there. That's about 400 people. And the old orchestra exists to a degree, but we have built over a large proportion of the audience, pulled out the stage into the space, and essentially built more auditorium on what was the old stage. If you're sitting on that side, you're essentially sitting where many, many people have performed over the last 100 years.
Wow. Now we have to talk about the Cabaret tables, which is true of most productions of Cabaret because it's part of the show.
Yeah, I really, really love these here.
And they're different from London.
They're totally different from London. But yeah, you can sit at the front of the space. You can get a phone call from members of the company.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Who may or may not be seeing you from somewhere in the building, although you won't be able to see them. So that's like quite, that's part of the fun of the eye concept, I suppose,
Right.
in a way. There's not a bad seat here. And even if you're sitting in the back row of the mezzanine, you're still nearer to the action on stage than you would have been normally in this space. And you can feel it. You can feel the energy of the crowd is really responding to it. They feel seen, you feel part of it, you feel almost like you're making it happen in some way, and that you're a character inside the piece.
And the actors are playing with you. They're coming right up close and personal.
Yeah.
And you can really feel that energy both ways.
I just think it's a reciprocal relationship, I think everybody on stage gets an immediate sense of what the atmosphere is from the crowd. And, the audience is just, as I say, is an essential component part of this production.
And it feels like an event.
Right, yeah, and I really, that's the thing that I'm really big on. I want a lot of my work to feel like it sort of touches all your senses, and to feel like you are part of something that is as much about the people sitting next to you as the performers on stage. And it's not just about this, but it's about who we are together and what it means for us to sit next to each other and experience work like this.